weekly breakdown of every NASCAR Cup Series race. Here are your hosts, Kevin Batstone, NASCAR Sky, and Jeff Davis.
Welcome back, race fans, to another episode of Mash the Gas podcast. We're here to break down the Food City 500 from the Bristol Motor Speedway. My name is Kevin Batstone. Joining me shortly, Miss NASCAR Sky, and joining me now, Mr. Jeff Davis. Jeff, who mashed the gas the hardest this weekend in Bristol?
Well, Kevin, I'll tell you what, it's 100% Kyle Larson winning the Food City 500 at Bristol. It was a pretty interesting race. Second win of the year. He led 411 laps. And its third win at Bristol and his 31st career win. So Kyle Larson was rocking it. And I thought it was really cool to see him, especially with in victory lane with the Jon Edwards passing, Jeff Gordon's longtime PR guy for almost 3 decades. And that race is kind of dedicated to him in a way. So it was really cool to see a Hendrick Motorsports car in victory lane.
Yeah, it was definitely special. It was good for Kyle Larson. I mean, domination races, we've said it before this year, they're not the most entertaining, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. I mean, Kyle Larson proved that he deserved it, and it's really nice to have that special touch in the background for Jon. So that was pretty good. I will have to admit, I did tell you guys before, but just so everybody knows, I didn't get a chance to watch Bristol, so I'm definitely leaning more with you guys. But yeah, it is cool to see that for Kyle Larson, and the Toyotas had a pretty good day too, I noticed.
Joe Gibbs Racing definitely showed up with some speed. I mean, my two guys on the radar, I know last week I had picked Kyle Larson to win this race, so I'm glad that my pick went through, won a little money on DraftKings. But yeah, the 11, it was basically the 5 and the 11 show. I mean, those guys were just battling, all race long, navigating lap traffic. I think one of the big highlights from this race is going to be the tire wear. Just like we talked about last week, what Bristol were we going to see? Saturday's practice session, we saw marbles 40 laps in, Jeff, they were done. I mean, those tires were completely down to the cords, and we were really expecting to see that on Sunday, but the higher temperatures just didn't wear. So that first stage, that first run, those guys were in, conservation mode, and then they realized, hey, these tires are not falling off. We're not seeing the marbles build up. It's go time. And that's very similar to what we saw there in the fall race, which Kyle Larson led 474 laps at. So a very similar play out of that, where we didn't see the fall off. The track really didn't rubber in with the marbles, and it made for a long green flag run. I mean, look, this was the shortest short track race in the history of NASCAR.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, that tire wear, because, when they were doing practice and qualifying, we were talking, the ambient temperatures around 70, of course, track temperature, probably somewhere right around 100 degrees. But when it came to Sunday morning, I saw a picture of Jamie Little busting out her American Express credit card to actually wipe the frost off of her windshield because it had crusted over. So it was only about 30 degrees when that race got started. So as far as the tire wear, I know some of the drivers are kind of complaining about it a little bit. It's like, hey, maybe Goodyear needs to come up with a better solution. But it's really hard to do that when you've got 70, 80 degrees one day and then 30 degrees on the day of the race. So, if you don't remember last year, we had, I believe, 8 sets of tires, and they actually had to bring out an extra set of tires for every single crew. So it was really hard to determine what, the tire should have been. And you can't do that on every single day just because of the temperature. But yeah, there was no tire fall off. Like you mentioned, there's no marbles. Those guys were just running those tires thick. And I know Denny Hamlin, he was a little pissed about it a little bit because he thought he could have caught up with Kyle Larson. But he kind of came into lap traffic towards the end of the race. I mean, he had problems getting around a few guys to actually try to catch Kyle Larson. But Larson, between last year and this year, I saw a percentage. I think he's won 92% of the laps at Bristol in the last 2 races. But, one thing, like you just mentioned, Joe Gibbs Racing really did a good job. Ty Gibbs, best finish of the year, getting a P3. And Ryan Blaney, he did a damn good job too, in my opinion. He came in P5. He led a few laps. I think he led about 25, 28 laps, somewhere right around there. So the Penske's were there, and the Joe Gibbs were there, and Hendrick obviously took the win.
Big win for those guys, like we said, with the the emotion of the passing of Jon Edwards. And Sky, you mentioned you caught the end of this race. I mean, with 6 to go, we see the 5 of Kyle Larson sail off into turn 3 and almost take down the fence. I mean, he just drove it straight in the fence, got loose, almost gave the whole thing away there at the end. Denny might have had a shot, and Kyle said in the post race, Jeff Gordon took a look at that right rear or the right front fender and said, "Man, you about you about killed us and with 6 to go there. And that's just one of those things at Bristol. It's those guys were fatigued. It was long green flag runs. It's tough to stay in that rhythm, tough to stay in that groove. We really didn't see caution for cause outside of the stage breaks. I mean, we had a spin with Shane Van Gisbergen, but outside of that, it was just such a long green flag race, very similar to what we saw in the fall.
Yeah, when I was rewatching the extended highlights, I think for stage two, it literally the only highlights were the the start of it and the end of it. Like there wasn't anything else. I was pretty surprised by that. It didn't seem like a whole lot was going on. It definitely was a lot of green flag runs. I didn't catch the Larson thing. It wasn't even in the extended highlights, that issue there. And Larson is such a good driver. I mean, he is. He makes some goofy little mistakes here and there sometimes that you don't expect to see out of him. But I do think, like you said, it's just him pushing very hard. I think he is just a driver that gives all or nothing. So I'm glad that he held on there because that is something that, he's definitely done in the past. Blaney being up there, one of the only Fords, I mean, he is really holding it down this year because the other drivers you think should be up there, I mean, the Ford just isn't. We're not finishing, or they're not finishing well. They're not. I don't know. They're having a rough time. The whole tire wear car thing. Sorry, we jumped to so many topics, but the tire wear, a lot of fans I'm seeing are starting to flip and ask, is it tire issue or is it the car issue? So that's something I wanted to bring up. That is a big discourse right now on social media.
Yeah, I'd have a hard time with that one because, like I said, they have to come up with these tires and the compounds and the softness or the hardness of the tire, in advance, weeks in advance, and so they have to go off of pretty much last year's data to see, okay, what kind of tire wear do we need? There definitely wasn't enough fall off on this one due to the weather. But yeah, you're right. As far as the Fords and Ryan Blaney, he is the one holding the camp right now. Alex Bowman really surprised me. I mean, he gets the pole, and then he led 39 laps, and then he had an engine issue that ended the race, leaving him with a 37th place finish. So this is the third race in a row that Alex Bowman has finished 27th or worse. So besides that, and like you mentioned, SVG, old Gizzy, spinning out, the only other cautions were the stage breaks. So, I mean, I still like the race, and very similar to last week. I mean, there were only 4 lead changes and 4 drivers that actually led the race. So, similar to last week a little bit, but I think last week's race was a little bit better in Darlington. But, right now, as far as points going, when we're looking at playoffs and whatnot, Christopher Bell's still in first place. Kyle Larson's in second. Then Denny Hamlin's in P3 with William Byron in fourth. And what I love, Josh Berry is actually in fifth right now because of his win. So really cool. I actually put Josh Berry in my lineup, but I wound up putting him in the garage to do the race during fantasy. And by the way, I think someone forgot to put in their picks this week, Kevin.
Yeah, it does happen. Looks like, Sky, you did miss your picks this week, but hey, we're on to Dega in 2 weeks. There'll be some time to rebound there. But Bristol, it's just like I said, it was one of those. What track are we going to get? Because if we had seen a 10-degree temperature difference, Larry McReynolds was breaking it down to the exact temperature of that concrete is where we were seeing the wear start to happen, and we really never saw it. These guys were able to run 100 laps on a run, because you can go so long here in a fuel run. And Ryan Blaney, was staying out there, Jeff, with 50 to go, 60 to go, had no choice but to come in, was trying to catch that caution that never fell. They were just trying to do something to get off of the pit cycle that Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin were on, because there was no way these guys were going to be able to drive up the field and get around those guys. Now, there was some comers and goers, right? Obviously, we saw Joey Logano. He spun in qualifying practice, kind of backed into the fence, had to start in the back, made his way through the field, got in a little bit more trouble, not the finish that the 22 wanted. But we definitely saw some, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. started P2, fell back, lost the groove, off sequence pit stop, ended up 22nd. So not to finish those guys we're looking for. Kyle Busch ended up with that speeding penalty early, went a lap down, got the wave around, got back on the lead lap, drove it up to 14th. It's just so tough to make up ground when you have these long green flag runs.
Yeah, it is really tough. And I had to give our friend a little bit of shit. We love you, Sky. I forgot to keep your picks in. So I just wanted to razz you a little bit that because that's what we do. That's
what better with it. It's so bad.
Hey, that's what we do as friends. We have fun with it. That's what this is all about. It's just a lot of having fun. But yeah, Kevin, you're right about the speeding penalty with Kyle Busch. I mean, when these laps are going, so far with not having to change tires, and then you get a speeding penalty. And I know Carson Hocevar was fuming on his radio when he got stuck there on pit road. He was like, where the F am I in as far as positioning? Because, when you go and pit under a green flag at Bristol, you're getting lapped once, maybe even twice, and that's exactly what happened. So he was really frustrated with his team, with his radio. But overall, like I said, it's pretty fun. Denny Hamlin getting his P2. He said you got to give it to Kyle and his team just for being a dominant performance. He had a flawless day. It's nice to hear Denny give some props out there, but it was funny because, of course, he got a little more booze this weekend than he did the last couple of weekends. But I don't know. I love Bristol. I think, like Kevin mentions it all the time. I like to see Bristol under the lights. It'd be really cool if they went back to that. I know when they did it for dirt for a while, it was kind of fun. But I'm glad they took it off the dirt. But I do want to see it go back to under the lights.
A big thing also that they're talking about on social media right now is a lot of people wanted to go back to dirt. I think it was Chase Briscoe was calling for it to be brought back to dirt, which I thought was pretty interesting. I love Bristol. I wasn't mad at Bristol dirt. I don't think that it seems it would be better if it wasn't something like a points paying race, in my opinion. I like the idea of it, but I don't know how much I like it being something that we, count towards the playoffs per se. But yeah, it was tough for Carson. I did see that. I will say it was funny to watch, his pit crew mess up in those outfits where it looks like they're wearing jeans. Like I did get a pretty good laugh out of that. But I feel like at this point we could start an entire segment on just like the woes of pit road because it every week it just seems like it gets worse and worse and there's big, big mistakes that really affect a lot of people's races in the end.
Yeah, it definitely a lot of storylines on pit road, Jeff. We saw that loose tire come ripping down pit road at a pretty good rate of speed. Just barely missed one of the pit crew members. I don't know if it was on the 47 that it nailed. I think it might have been Suarez's tire that came ripping down pit road there at a pretty good clip, loose wheel. A lot of speed on that tire. I mean, if that had hit one of the crew members, I think we'd be talking about injury. But, once again, we saw green flag pit stops at Bristol. That's extremely difficult. Jeff, you mentioned you're probably going to lose a lap or two there, and then you're forced into a position to have to wave around. It's such a difficult place, right? And then under yellow, we have to pit at the back straightaway, come all the way around. You got to time those scoring loops a little bit because those guys will gas it up through the middle of 1 and 2. To try to make up time. Just a lot of areas for error, driver error, and the pressure's on. And we saw a lot of mistakes made on pit road again here in Bristol.
Yeah, there have been so many pit road mistakes this year, whether it's speeding or a tire coming off, whether it's, on the track or not. But that goes back to what we were kind of talking about last week a little bit. I kind of liked having the 5 lugs on there. I don't like the single lug. I really don't. I just, every single race, it seems like, someone's tire is coming off and then run down, causing a caution. And, of course, we'll get some, suspensions and fines. Pit crew gets suspended. It's just an unfortunate thing, but I kind of like the way the Xfinity race has been running with it. I think we should go back to the 5 lugs. I mean, what do you guys think about 5 lugs versus 1?
I mean, you definitely make a good point. I don't know if I really feel one way or another about it per se, but I can definitely agree. It has been causing a lot of issues and maybe either we need to fix those issues so that we can make sure that we're securing the lug nut in the tire correctly. I mean, they show us every single race how that's supposed to be done. And I feel like if we can either streamline that process or, yeah, we're going to have to go back to something like the 5 lugs, something that can keep, everybody safe. Like you said, that tire was ripping down pit road pretty fast. I did watch that in the highlights and I mean, it just barely missed that pit crew guy. And it definitely would have been probably a pretty serious injury if it had hit him for sure.
Yeah, the tires are definitely something I think needs to be addressed. It's just one of those things that NASCAR needs to look at. Maybe look at going back to the 5 lugs. Kevin and I, when we were at Phoenix a couple of years back, was the last year they actually used the 5 lug nuts. And it was cool because they had the gals from the Monster Energy. Remember, Kevin, they were passing those lug nuts out to everyone. I'm like, oh, cool, it's a lug nut. And then I just realized, hey, this is the last time we're using five lug nuts, in the Cup Series. But I think NASCAR needs to take a look at it and see if, is this something that needs to be addressed or changed? Because we are definitely seeing way too many tires, all over the place. But yeah, between the penalties on that, speeding on pit road for old Kyle Busch and, some of the stuff that's been going on in pit road. But I will say this, hey, Bubba Wallace still has the fastest pit stall time and pit times, even though Fox is not putting those numbers out, which I'll still bitch at every single week pretty much. But, Bubba Wallace, I'm surprised he didn't have a little bit better job because his pit crew is kicking ass.
Yeah, and you mentioned Fox there again. There's been a lot of heat coming on him, not just from us, but read an article on a national level where people are just starting to get kind of outraged. And it started Friday night in the Truck Series over there on FS1, where they were trying to show a replay of an incident on the track, and it was just like the aerial. You couldn't see anything, and these guys were, the broadcasters were saying they saw one thing, but then the broadcast was showing another. Just a complete disaster. So I don't know what Fox is doing. It seems like we've kind of griped about this a little bit throughout the season. Is it because their resources are allocated to IndyCar now? But I've just seen a decline overall with the way that Fox has been covering the sport. I mean, love hearing Clint and Kevin in the booth give each other a hard time. I think those guys are funny, but there's overall the delivery of it. Amazon Prime, obviously that's kind of the Fox team over there. So I can't really say, oh, it's Prime or Fox. It's basically the Fox team. But these guys, I know we got a couple weeks left to go before we go full time to the Prime team for Memorial Day weekend, Coca-Cola 600. But I think this is probably the worst year that I've seen Fox Sports coverage of NASCAR.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. I mean, Fox generally does a pretty good job on everything, and I think they have a really good team. I really do like their Jamie Little. I love her to death. Her, McMurray. These guys do a good job on pit road. The guys up in the booth, I think, are doing really well. But one thing I did want to bring up was old Jesse Love. This is, Jesse Love from the Xfinity series. This was his first Cup debut. He'd never run a Cup race before. I mean, he probably didn't have the finish that he wanted to. He came in P31, and but it was a good experience for him. And I think that's someone we're going to be looking at a lot in the future because Jesse Love's got some talent.
Yeah, Jesse is a really good driver, and it's always nice to get your first Cup start. I mean, it sucks when you finish, out in the 30s, but I mean, it is what it is. He has so much time to grow, and it's be interesting to see, what ride he comes up and takes in the next few years. So I'm definitely looking out for that for sure.
Yeah, there's a stat about, Cup drivers and their first Cup start. They're not good. Most of them, I think average finish for first time Cup start is like 28th or worse. So, it's really about getting that experience going through, because these guys are used to running 250s, 300s, to run a 500, it's about getting that repetition, right? Hitting your marks, getting through pit road, running a complete race. There's so much that go into it that the average viewer doesn't quite realize how difficult these races are to run. And, the physical and mental demand that Bristol puts on it's pretty excruciating, especially when you have those long green flag runs, and that's where we were starting to see. I mean, the 43, how many times did he get in the wall, Jeff? I mean, I lost count. I mean, Clint was saying at one point, he's like, I think that was the 15th time Eric Jones just plowed the wall on exit of turns 2 and 4.
As you know, I like to say, I know it only happens in Darlington where you can truly get those Darlington stripes. But even though we were in Bristol, baby, you get those stripes. Yeah, they were painting the wall a lot. So, and that's just part of short track racing. So. But as far as the Xfinity and the Cup cars, they're so much different, and that's why, like you're mentioning, the average finish of guys getting their debut race, from the Xfinity series into the Cup, P28 or below, they're getting some little bit of just help under their help. They're looking to get into the races and see what it takes to become a Cup driver, because I mean, this is the nonchalant creme de la creme, so to speak. These Cup drivers, these guys are the best, and that's why we've kind of talked a little bit in the past about when Ross Chastain first got in and he was just still driving kind of like a shithead and running into everybody, and we got a little bit out with Carson Hocevar, the last few races. But as far as the Xfinity, now here's something I wanted to ask both of y'all, because Xfinity and the Cup cars are so much different. Like back in the past, a lot of times, your fans would actually bitch a little bit about Cup drivers going, hey, I'm going to go run an Xfinity race. And it's like, okay, well, is that fair to the Xfinity drivers because they don't have the skill that the Cup drivers have yet? But on the other hand, I've actually heard Xfinity racers say it's really cool to have a Cup driver in there to gauge how good you are. So it's interesting. I mean, but no, I thought it was really cool to see Jesse Love out there getting in the field, getting on the track and see what he can be able to do in the future.
Yes, good old bushwhacking. That's one of my favorite topics to talk about because it's such an interesting thing. But I go back and forth on it. I definitely like the idea of, Cup drivers kind of moving around and racing in the lower series because it does push drivers to be better and you want to be good. You want to show that you can compete with people at this level.
Mm-hmm.
I do though, however, I don't like when the Cup drivers are really affecting Xfinity playoff in how do I word this? Like, I think it was a couple weeks ago when Larson was racing down there. He almost wrecked the person in the lead, and it was just like a regular Xfinity guy. I don't remember who. And that to me, it's like, don't race him that hard that you're gonna like, because it doesn't mean anything to Larson. It's just a win or a loss, but that could be someone's playoff hope. It's different if you race him clean, but if you're wrecking him, I don't like that. That's the only thing I don't like.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, yeah, when you get a cup driver coming to the Xfinity races and creating chaos to guys that are in the playoffs, and you take those points away from them, it kind of isn't fair. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a really valid point. So I think that maybe the cup drivers, they run their asses off and they're in there to compete. But they also have to realize, hey, if you're taking playoff points away from somebody in the Xfinity series, getting stage points from them, and it's maybe not intentional, but you could have maybe not have wrecked them, or got that extra contact. I think you're right, Sky. I think it's one of those things that these cup drivers need to be aware that these guys are still running for a championship too, so they need to kind of like be a little bit more careful, which is I'm going back to Carson Hocevar. He needs to watch his P's and Q's a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, we know you want to win, but you can't just like full send it 100% of the time and just split the middle of two cars in a lane that's not even there and wreck someone out. And if that's happening in the Xfinity series because the cup drivers there, well, I think they need to watch that shit.
Yeah, I think one idea that could kind of help this a little bit. Obviously, going back years ago when NASCAR said, "Hey, if you're a Cup Series driver, you're running for a Cup championship. You got to declare what series you're running a championship for." Because years ago, you could, back in the old Busch days, you could win the Busch Championship, the Winston Cup. It was kind of no holds barred. Now, I am in favor of no Cup guys running during the Xfinity playoffs, and same with the trucks, right? So when the truck and Xfinity playoffs are happening, it's exclusively those drivers. That way, there's really no interference when it comes down to the championship. The regular season, I'm able to, be a little bit more lenient on who we're letting run. I mean, because typically we're seeing guys like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, William Byron, Christopher Bell. We're seeing, experienced guys come down to the lower level, and these guys know how to race with respect for the most part, right? We're going to see some hiccups here and there, but I think the best way to approach it, in my opinion, would be not to allow any competition in the lower series during the playoffs.
Yeah, I do remember a number of years back when I was here at the Texas Motor Speedway race where Kyle Busch, I think it was Ron Hornaday, where he intentionally wrecked him and he put him in the wall. And they wound up suspending him for both the Xfinity race and the Cup race that year. So due to his, being an asshole, so to speak, which I know, you shouldn't applaud someone just because you're pissed off, but it does happen. Tempers get to these guys. But yeah, they parked him for the Saturday and the Sunday race because of what he did in the truck race on that Friday night. But I do like the three races running in weekends. It's so fun to be able to do that. And if someone like Kyle Larson can go in there and get the sweep, and Kyle Busch is the only one that's ever done it at Bristol, won all three races. Matter of fact, if I remember correctly, and if I'm wrong, just let me know. But I think he did it twice. So I remember him getting that broom out and sweeping it. But as far as drivers doing one single race a year, one thing I wanted to talk about was Dale Jr. He's not going to do an Xfinity race this year. He's not. He's like, you know what? I'm going to go bring it back, and he's going to actually do this coming weekend in Georgia. He's going to be running. Let's see here, the late model cars at Bristol Motor Speedway this coming Saturday night. So it will be cool to kind of see the 8 get back on the track again, but he's just not doing it in any of the normal NASCAR, Cup, truck, Xfinity races.
Yeah, it's always good to see Dale Jr. back on a track, no matter what track it is. I'll always be rooting for him. Dale Jr. for life, for sure. But honestly, going back to it, I think, for the pun here, it's a double-edged sword in a way because it the race that let's say Kyle Larson comes down and he races and he accidentally wrecks somebody who's, that's like the one race, their one shot at that year, the rest of the year turns to shit. 'Cause it doesn't take much to have, one wreck here and then next thing you know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks have gone by and you finish 30th worse every race. So it takes, one thing. And that's where I don't disagree. I love the Cup guys coming down. I 100%, I feel like that kind of outweighs the bad because there isn't always wrecks, but there is that slight chance where you can really screw somebody who's, really needs it in the underseries. So I could see both sides definitely, but ultimately I definitely agree. I mean, I'm all for the Cup guys coming down.
I like it, and that's why I'm glad you brought that up, Sky, because it's like, I think the Xfinity guys want to see, okay, how can I compete against the Cup Series drivers? Do I have the talent to do it? How do I get to that next level? And I think by the Cup guys coming into the Xfinity Series, it really gives these guys a good gauge on, what do I need to do? How can I improve? Or, am I at that level? So it's really, I do like it. I like the Cup drivers being able to go in there. I know it's only a certain number of races that they can do per year. And there's quite a few drivers that do it. But then, we look at guys that drive all sorts of series, like we're talking about Christopher Bell and, Kyle Larson, running, Sprint Cup cars and doing the dirt race and going to the Chili Bowl up in Oklahoma. I love that kind of stuff. I love that these guys do all sorts of racing. And that's what really improves a driver's ability. It's like I can run any track, I can run any type of car, and I think that's what we see out of some of these younger guys that have been doing this. Because when you have that much experience in dirt tracks, late model, go karts, all of it, and then they bring it into the trucks, and hey, you got to admit it. Even the sim racing alone, folks have just run sim racing have come up and been able to run these type of cars.
No question that seat time yields results, no matter what seat time that is, no matter what series it is. If a driver's out there being competitive, it's a competitive advantage on Sunday or Saturday, whatever series that they run. But I mean, look, Kyle Larson ran the Xfinity race this past weekend, right? He won it. He led 277 of the 300 laps, so complete dominance over there as well. Where you have your big hitters. Carson Kvapil ran runner up. Justin Allgaier led a couple laps. Sammy Smith. Kyle Larson stole the show. We didn't really see a lot of our Xfinity regulars up there battling for laps led. That was just kind of the theme of the weekend at Bristol. But, and of course, going back to Sammy Smith, we've kind of gotten some more details since last week on this Lamar Jackson, Dale Earnhardt Jr. deal. Dale kind of clarified a little bit on the download that it was more of a trademark thing, and that basically Lamar was challenging the trademark of the 8 that we've been seeing. Junior secured the rights to the stylized 8 that we all know and love from the Bud days. So basically, that's what we're going to see going forward. But there was a lot of confusion with that, and still probably should have never even escalated to where it is. But I think, looking at it in the end, Dale just said, this really isn't worth our time. We're going to trademark the stylized 8, let Lamar have whatever 8 he wants. We're going to move on with Sammy Smith.
Yeah, and that 8, like you said, that trademark 8, just the look of it, and that's exactly what is going to be running this weekend in Georgia, and that's iconic to us, And obviously, the Earnhardt family in general just has a lot of respect and a little bit of love, and everyone that loves NASCAR. You got to love Junior. I mean, he's a good old boy. He's a redneck. I love the shit he does. He talks straight out. It's funny as hell listening to him on the podcast. And his wife, sometimes when she gets on, Amy, I love her to death. But she sometimes takes over the show a little bit. And I think Junior, that's the only one he bows down to. He's like, oh, wait, Amy's talking. So he just kind of sit there and grins and bear it. But as far as anyone else, he's like, no, fuck that, But like you mentioned, hey, I'm not going to screw around with Lamar Jackson. It's like, this is a waste of my time. I really don't care. But it was just a fun social media for the last 2 to 3 weeks with that whole kind of back and forth between the just the number 8 in general. I got a kick out of it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
It was definitely funny, but it was just dumb, honestly. The jokes were funny, but Lamar, I was like, what are you doing? But yeah, Dega coming up. We have a break next weekend for Easter, so that'll be good. I'm going back home, so it worked out good. Then we got Dega coming up, which honestly I need the break because Super Speedway stressed me out to the point of pulling my hair out, especially as a Penske fan. So I'm glad that I have a break before I have to deal with Dega's shenanigans for sure. But who are some people that you would put in some fantasy this weekend?
Well, definitely. I mean, Ricky Stenhouse
Next.
Jr. Definitely Stenhouse for
You
sure.
think Stenhouse?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's coming off. He's the defending winner from the Yellowwood 500 back in October. Stenhouse, he's just one of those guys I always have in the garage at super speedway races. He's one of the best at it. We call him Recky Spinhouse. He does cause a lot of mayhem on the racetrack, but one thing I give credit when credit's due is that the 47 knows how to run super speedways. And I would also include Brad Keselowski in that conversation. I think BK, the RFK Fords are going to be really fast. I'm going to stay away fantasy wise for Dega. I'm going to stay away from our heavy hitters. I mean, Hendrick Motorsports, the JGRs, the guys that I've been smoking through, probably even the Penske guys. I mean, we know that Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano are going to be a threat, but I'm not going to roll the dice and waste a use on them this week or next weekend, Jeff.
Yeah, no way. I'm not going to either. I mean, this is definitely one of those tracks. And like you mentioned, Brad Kozlowski and Noah Gragson, they actually do very, very well in Stenhouse. He does very well in super speedway racing. But again, super speedway, like, Sky was just mentioning, it's a freaking roll of the dice. I mean, there's so many times, one little wreck and all of a sudden you got 15 cars collected and, like I said, it's always the most expensive races of the year. When we go to Talladega or Daytona, it's the most expensive race of the year because so many cars get torn up. And as we know, these cars are about a quarter million a piece. I mean, they go through $8,000 in tires just alone, and that's at every single race. So, like we were kind of talking about last weekend, the cost to be able to compete in, the Cup Series, there's a lot more of a purse. But when you start getting into the Xfinity and the trucks, I mean, if you don't finish in the top 15, top 12, top 15, you're actually having to pay just to run these races. And, guys can't afford that. And it's tough on the smaller teams, because you can't get the right equipment. They don't have the quality there. So I'm glad that, things have changed with the Cup races, but I do still think that NASCAR needs to share a little bit more of that money with these underfunded teams, be it the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series. Yeah, next week I'm not using any of my big hitters. No way. I'm down to like 5-6 uses on a lot of guys before the playoffs start because when we get the playoffs, we actually get to re-rack them and get more use. We got 5 uses, I believe. Yeah, I'm starting to get low on some of my picks. I mean, I know you are too, Kevin.
Well, again, this is a race where it's an opportunity to make some aggressive bets on DraftKings because the odds are it's the best betting odds that you have a chance to make on a plus 1,200, a plus 2,000, because it's anybody's race, as we know, Sky. I mean, it's the survival of the fittest. Get through the mess, be there at the end. I mean, it's just typical Dega, and I know it's a fan favorite. They're putting it on National Fox, right? Big surprise. We've been on FS1 for a while. We get back to the mayhem. Rumor has it Cletus McFarland is going to be running the ARCA race here in Dega, so we'll be able to see a little bit more of that from the ARCA side for Talladega. That'll be I'm sure we'll have some sound bites and some funny things coming out of that. But I mean, it's
Love them.
yeah, no, Cletus is great. I've been following his YouTube channel for a long time, and I hope he finds success in NASCAR. He certainly has guys around him that can do it. The Freedom 500 just happened, and quick shout out to Tony Stewart. I know we're about at the end of the podcast here, guys, but Tony Stewart got his first NHRA victory in Top Fuel in Las Vegas yesterday at the Four Wide Nationals. Clint Boyer said it on the broadcast before he went off that Tony was going to do it. He finally got it done.
Super cool. Yeah, that was really so cool to see Tony Stewart do that. I mean, and here's another one. Even, before we were talking about, the sprint cars and like the Chili Bowl up in Oklahoma, Tony Stewart, he can run almost any car. I mean, as far as his age, he's kind of like a Kyle Larson, but obviously way more experience. He's been around. But to see him go out there in the NHRA and get his actually first win in the field dragsters was freaking awesome. So good for Smoke. I really thought that was damn cool.
He deserves it. Man works hard. He can drive anything. Total respect for Tony Stewart. So stoked for him to have moved on from Stewart Haas and now, pursuing an NHRA championship. I think it's fantastic. So congrats to Smoke. We're on to Dega. Easter, Passover going on. Hope everyone has a nice time with their family. We'll take a little break here. The Cup guys can pump the brakes, rest, and get ready to go because it's going to be chaos with Dega coming up. Texas, Kansas, All-Star race, Coca-Cola 600. It's on. So this is our opportunity to get a little bit of rest. Last minute thoughts there, Sky. Who you got for Dega?
I don't know. I think I'm gonna go with Justin Haley. It's a random choice, but I feel like you have to be random in order to have any luck in these things. So I think I'm gonna go with Justin Haley.
I like the pick.
It's a good pick. I'm going to go with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and being that next week's off. I mean, man, I hate to keep picking on Sky today during this podcast, but she's going to have to keep that orange hair for another couple weeks. So I'm going to go with Ricky. I'm definitely going with Ricky in the 47 car.
I'm going to take Brad Keselowski. I'm going with the 6. I think he can get it done. He knows how to be there in the end. He's going to keep it clean. Brad Keselowski is going to be our winner.
Oh, I would love to see a Brad win. We need a Brad win to heal us.
Yep, he might have to carry the torch for the Ford camp. So, all right, y'all. Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks. We got Rockingham coming up. We didn't really get a chance to dive into that, but Rockingham for the trucks and Xfinity this weekend. That's pretty cool to see them back. Cup is off. We're going to be off next Monday. We'll be back in 2 weeks to break down all of the action from Dega. I'm sure it's going to be chaos as always. And be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Mash the Gas. Follow Sky at NASCAR Sky. Send us an email, mashthegaspodcast@gmail.com if you want to interact with the show. And until then, race fans,
we're going to mash that gas. And one final shout out to Mr. Jon Edwards, born in 1972. Great man, great personality, such a good man for the sport. So, everyone's thoughts and prayers with the Jon Edwards family. 2 weeks from now, we're going to mash the gas.
I feel the engine screaming back. I feel the sweat running down